So I'm not saying, we should all live in this hierarchless world, okay? But when it comes to your friends, it's very, very important that, you have a clear understanding of where you stand with them. Because if you see someone as an equal, but he doesn't have a clear understanding of how that hierarchy works, it can cause conflict. So here's a very useful tip if you want to test someone to see if they're a good friend or would make a good friend or a good person. This is a general litmus test that will see if they have virtue or if they are a little bit more opportunistic and not so interested in being a true friend that supports you and more interested in being someone who gets things from you. So the test is very simple. You give someone power over you. And this can be anything from just a small moment where, they see a moment of vulnerability and you show them that vulnerability. Or you tell them a secret. You confide in them. You tell them something very personal. Or it could be very extreme, like, you have to live with them because you don't have any place to stay. And so you're kind of at their mercy because they at least had the virtue to let you stay with them, right? So this can be a mixed bag, and I don't want you to completely disregard someone because they have a moment of imperfection, right? So there's a lot of nuance here that you need to pay attention to, and I wouldn't just completely dismiss someone's character outright because, they have a moment where they act a little bit superior towards you, or they see themselves as they're helping you, but in order to help you, they have to kind of be above you and reach their arm down to pull you up. If you can kind of take that metaphor and then apply it to the feelings that you sometimes have when someone helps you or you help other people, right? So it's very easy to understand this dynamic that I'll try to set up, or that you should try to set up with someone, where if someone consistently comes to you for advice and leadership and guidance, well, you're going to naturally presume some sort of authority over them. It's a very, very natural thing that happens automatically. If you are part of some sort of social group and someone is new to it and they're not immediately accepted as, it could be, there's certain groups that have set hierarchies, right? Like if you go to a jiu-jitsu gym or a taekwondo dojo or dojang, karate dojo, whatever, right? You have a built-in hierarchy of belts, right? Because hierarchies allow us to have a clear understanding of how we should treat each other, right? You treat each other with respect, but those who are lower treat those who are higher with more respect, and then people who are equal to each other treat each other as equals, right? This serves a function in society, and it's very useful. So I'm not saying, we should all live in this hierarchless world, okay? But when it comes to your friends, it's very, very important that, you have a clear understanding of where you stand with them. Because if you see someone as an equal, a comrade, like you guys are going through life together, but he doesn't have a clear understanding of how that hierarchy works, it can cause conflict. And friends of yours can have areas of strengths that you don't have, right? Like your friend can be super athletic and, he would kick your ass in anything that has to do with athleticism, but, you're really crafty with business, or you are very knowledgeable about something that's important to that person, right? So it has to be important to them for them to have respect for you on some level. And a true friendship has clear hierarchies. You can have a friendship who is above you, right? And you respect them and see them as someone who kind of guides you, or at least is just more apt in a specific field. But, it's not really a friendship then, actually, to be honest. It's more of a student, teacher, follower, leader hierarchy. And if you pay attention to most friend groups, like you can say that, oh, hierarchies don't exist, we're all da-da-da. Look, there are hierarchies naturally evolve. All you have to do is go and watch a group for a certain amount of time, and you're going to know who is on top. And it's usually one person. Usually you have one person who's kind of leading the group. And if you don't think there's a leader in the group, you're not paying attention. You can have, a couple people who are generally around the same rank. Let's just use these terms, kind of loosely to give some clarity to this discussion. You can have people who are generally equal, but from what I've seen, most of the time there's someone who's in charge. And you can see these things by, like, whose house do people mostly go to? Right? Who's the one? I mean, it's very obvious once you think about it. Like, all the people go to this person, right? It's not the only like indicator of that they're the leader, I guess, but it is a pretty decent indication. You know, who's the one who gets the most respect, who gets the most attention, who's usually giving the most advice, right? All of these behaviors usually indicate either what that person is, or you can look at people's attitudes, and that indicates how people think they are, okay? Now, this is what we're trying to get at in this video. I want you to be aware of how your friends see you, because it's very important. I know a lot of people who have friendships that probably aren't very healthy friendships. And all they would have to do to see if they're healthy friendships or not is to test whether or not those friendships are camaraderies, or if two people are not in line with how they see the hierarchy, right? So the simplest way you can do it is very simple. Like, you have a moment where, you know, you're going through a tough time in your life. I mean, this is going to require a little bit of a risk, right? But it's better that you try a risk with someone and you initially maybe take an L where, like, you lower yourself, you're vulnerable, you humble yourself. I mean, that's inherently a good act anyways, because you should always try to humble yourself, even with someone who you believe is below you, right? But, you know, let's say you show a moment of vulnerability and you confide in someone and blah, 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 and they turn out to not pass the test, right? They leak something of yours to someone else, gossip, they kind of act superior over you, whatever. It sucks, but at least they failed a test that you created, right? It was a manufactured laboratory experiment, rather than you not knowing if someone's a good friend or not. And then later on, when something really important happens, you find out they're not their friend because they're not there for you, right? And my litmus test for friendship goes deeper than just whether they're going to support you, right? Because I'll give you an example of an experience that I had. And the friend did help a lot, right? And so I'm very thankful for what he did for me. But his behavior started to change after he was helping me, because he kind of saw himself as above me. And this unfortunately created a very strange dynamic. And it started to infect the way he was treating me. So he did something good for me, right? So I was grateful for that, and I respected the fact that he had the integrity to help out a friend in need. But then his behavior afterwards started to change, and I didn't like how he was treating me. And there was sometimes, you know, he stepped over the line of respect. And then I was like, okay, so I'm grateful for what he did for me, but do I have to continue to be in a relationship that is not, you know, positive for me, because he's starting to kind of put me down, see himself as better than me, and it's not helping anyone. It's just his ego is being expressed because I had a moment of weakness in my life and vulnerability, and I needed some help, right? So this revealed his viewpoints, right? And it's a very unfortunate story. I don't have any grudges against him. I actually tried to reach out to him recently because, you know, it had been like 5 years, and I was just wondering how he was, but he didn't want to talk to me anymore. So I'll give you the story, and it's a bit like on the heavy end of like testing someone, but just remember, like, you can do it with anything of like confiding in someone, just kind of complaining to someone. You know, do they listen and try to help you? Or do they not even help you? So that's the first test. If they don't even help you, then okay, they're not a good friend, right? But the second thing is that if you do go to them for guidance or help or whatever, do they use that opportunity do they ever lord it over you? They remind you of how they helped you. That's one of the things that I noticed about some people, was they would help you and then they would always remind you of the fact that they helped you. And they would use it as like a chip of like debt. And a good person doesn't do that. Unless, of course, like you promise to pay them back and, you know, you're not paying them back, then yeah, they should go ask where their money is. Or they use it as a chance to be superior to you, right? You kind of see how, like, when there's girls around, they start acting like they're better than you. And it can be very subtle. They might not have to do anything explicitly. It's just the way that, like, their body language expresses itself. Because people, when it comes to money, girls, and status, those are the avenues where you can always test someone, right? And it's always a foolproof method to see if someone is a good friend or not, right? On an equal level, right? If someone is, like I said, a leader of yours or a mentor of yours, then you need to accept that position where you learn from them, and they're above you, and you accept that in exchange for the guidance that they give you, okay? But it should be clear that that's how the hierarchy works. This story was a friend of mine in university, and we didn't like each other in the beginning. I'm not going to go through our whole history, but eventually we kind of started to click because then we lived together in a fraternity house, and we started to really bond. And then I started really, really focusing on girls and socializing, and I even got into pickup. Like, it was like it was like the thing, like pickup artist. Like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I remember saying I was going to do it, and I told everyone because I was an idiot. I'm way too transparent with my life. And all my fraternity was like, oh, and I remember him specifically. He was like, yeah, I'll show you how to do pickup, because he was pretty decent with girls. I was better than him, but he had a huge ego, and he was pretty good though. And I remember him kind of like teasing me, and it was kind of arrogant, but I was like, that's fine. And then as I started to like do it, he was like, oh, I'll go out with you one night. And I was like, all right. So he went out with me to a party, and like everyone's like, hey Hector, what's up? Da-da-da. And he's like, what the fuck? Because he was still stuck in the bubble of our fraternity. And I was a, interfraternal person. Like, I was hanging out with all people from all social strata, different, kind of different like archetypes of people. And I was just very friendly and had a lot of friends. And he's like, holy shit, like, dude, you have so many friends. And he was just like, he understood. I was like, yeah, you didn't see this because you were like, stuck in just your purview of your own little watering hole. I'm playing on the plains. So he's like, okay. And then he started like having more of a social life with me. And then he saw that I was picking up all these girls, and he started to really gain respect for me, which was, it's fine. You got to have something worthy of someone's respect for them to respect you, right? I mean, someone should respect you as a human being worthy of compassion and kindness always across the board. You should never treat anyone badly, even if they treat you badly. That's true morality. But if you want to be on the level of someone respecting you, well, then you need something respectable. And, having social skills and being able to get girls is a very respectable thing among men, because it is a skill and it's difficult to do. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But it's not easy, and not everyone can do it. There's a reason why I have a channel where I teach people and people to go to me for guidance, because a lot of people struggle with this. Anyway, we started progressing and da-da-da-da-da. And I wonder if I should get into that detail. No, because it's a little bit too personal. Yeah, I'll skip that one. But generally what happened was it's not really something it's not that I don't mind sharing, it might just make it seem too confrontational between us. It involved a girl, right? But I wouldn't want to like set up any situation where I'm talking bad about a girl that's important to him. So we kind of grew apart because I went to Europe. But we still stayed in touch. We were still best friends, but obviously I was out in Europe and doing the thing I did Chase's one date product, and then I was traveling around Europe. Well, I was going through a very difficult time because I was kind of lost as to what I wanted to do. And I was working for Girls Chase, but I still wasn't really figuring out how to make a lot of money with it. And a lot of other things were going through my mind, and I was pretty fucking depressed. And, I started drinking a lot, and I was in Barcelona living on Las Ramblas, like literally the most popular street in the world. And I could have just been doing pickup every day, but I was just so depressed that I barely went out. And I was running out of money, not making a lot of money. And then eventually I was like, all right, I'm almost broke. Like, I need to do something or I'm going to be homeless. So he was going to get married, and he was like, hey, why don't you just come to my marriage, or my wedding, and, you can stay with me after. I was like, okay, fuck it. So I left Spain, and then I went to go to his wedding, and then went to his wedding, and then we lived together for about 3 months. And it was difficult, but I was very, very thankful for him having the integrity to help a friend in need. And, he gave me very cheap rent. And, well, at first it was supposed to be free. And then he started charging rent. That was, and then he said he was going to pay for my food. And then he ended up not paying for his food. I think his wife convinced him of that. But, it's okay. Whatever. I could afford that at least. So I'm thankful, right? It's very hard to have an apartment where you don't have a lease and you're paying cheap rent. So, I'm very thankful for that. So I can't complain too much. As I started living with him, I started to see changes in his behavior, because at that point he had a stable job. He was making a stable income. I was not making a stable income. I hadn't yet figured out the coaching. That's where I started to make a livable income, not like I was drowning in money, just a livable income through doing personal coaching. And I was kind of struggling, and I was lost, and I didn't know what to do, and I was starting to drink a lot, and it was just I was going down a bad road. Well, he started, his demeanor started changing. His demeanor started to become a little bit superior, and he started like giving me advice, and he started acting as if, and he was very explicit with it. And one of the biggest things he was trying to teach me was like, yeah, man, you got to get married. You got to settle down, da-da-da. You don't have to live this bachelor life. And I'm like, bro, you feel like, it sounds like you found religion and you're trying to like shove it down my throat. Like just a few years ago, you were out chasing pussy just like I was. And then, you suddenly, I don't want to talk too bad about him, but basically all of a sudden, you get married and then, oh, okay, you shouldn't be out chasing pussy and you need to have stability and settle down and da-da-da. And there's tons of psychological reasons that I think he was projecting that life onto me. But I didn't appreciate it. And I didn't like that he was kind of seeing himself as an authority figure. And it really started to express itself when we would sometimes get in arguments. And it's very difficult to get into an argument with someone when you're living under their roof. Like, just think about it for a second. Like, you inherently are like, maybe I shouldn't anger someone or that even if I disagree with them, should I really start shit with someone where I'm kind of living at the mercy of their kindness? Which is horrible, right? You shouldn't be afraid to do it. It's a respectful thing. You should think like that. But someone shouldn't make you feel like that, right? So you're starting to get a hint of what I'm trying to show you when it comes to how someone acts when you have a moment of vulnerability, like you're living under their roof and da-da-da-da. If you were like at an equal partnership, right, in terms of like your friendship, like your comrades, and then they start to assume a position of authority over you. I mean, clearly when it comes to finances and stability, yes, he did have that up on me at that moment, right? But I was also just very early in my career of being a dating coach, because as I was living with him, I did actually end up, selling my first few coaching packages where people, were paying a couple grand to work with me. And I was like, holy shit, my income just suddenly, 5 times itself from nothing to, just enough. And so it was just me early in my career. It wasn't like I was lost in the sense I have no idea what I would do. I know what I wanted to do. I was just dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression and shit. But I had a general idea of where I was going just early in my career. But he was kind of treating me like I'm a kid and I'm still figuring out what I want to do with my life, which was clearly not the case. And even though he had this on me, and yes, but at the same time, his job was kind of it's a government job, right? So it's not like anyways, you can see already, there are hints of criticism still in my mind, right? So I suppose I'm not 100% over it, right? But I am just telling a story too, right? But you can see how this affects you emotionally, right? Even years later, I can remember how it felt to have a friend who was supposed to be here with me, right? I mean, I was better with girls because that's my skill, right? That was the thing I focused on 100%. And he kind of decided to retire. He got a wife. And that's fine if he had mastered it, and then he's kind of like the grandmaster who did all he wanted, and then, he teaches people. But he didn't, like, go anywhere near the journey that I did. He kind of just went, like, maybe halfway. But, so that was my skill, right? So in that area, I kind of am more knowledgeable. But then in, like, this area, like what he does for a living, he's obviously more knowledgeable in technology and this and this. Okay, so we each have skills where we're like, we respect each other, we go to the gym together. So we're partners, kind of, right? We're best friends. But he started to see a few areas where I was weak, and then he started to see himself as above me. And it was very clear in the way that he was expressing himself. Like I said, I had hesitations to argue with him, but I still would because I'm very stubborn and I'm going to let my opinion be known. And when we would get into it, if there was any sort of resistance on his end, he would be like, and he would get like have this attitude like, you're a stupid child. And I was like, that's really disrespectful, because there was times when he did go to me for advice because he did recognize me as someone who knew about dating and relationships. And, he had a few issues with his girl. And I went and talked with him. But when I went and talked with him, I wasn't like, yeah. I didn't treat him like he was a client, right? I treated him like my best friend. I was like, hey, buddy, this is my opinion, based on what I know. And I'm like, I don't, this and this and this, I'm not going to give away personal information of what was going on. It's just like, hey, man, you should work on this. Maybe you should see it this way, I don't really like that. That's not a good sign, blah, blah, blah. And he would be like, oh, okay, I see. So, he did have some respect for me. But see, when I had a position of power, I guess this is me making myself look better. Like, oh, I had the integrity to, but like, I'm just telling you the truth of how it was. When I had a position of power, a position of authority momentarily based on my skill set over a friend, I didn't lord it over him. I learned very on that you got to be careful with giving people advice, because people do feel like you're an authority and it makes them feel shitty. And I went through great lengths to make sure I wasn't doing that too much. I mean, a little bit I'm going to coach because that's my job, but I was pretty careful. But when he would have a position of authority, it started to like come off weird, right? And then after I moved out and I went to Romania and I was able to support myself, we stayed in contact, but his behavior had really, really started to change. And I called him out on it a few times. And then eventually it hit its peak where, and I knew why he was changing his behavior too. It was because I had those moments of vulnerability and he was maybe trying to get me in line with his way of thinking. Right, so this advice that I'm giving you, I hope this story is being illustrative and it's not just a story time, right? I hope that it's showing you like you might have experiences like this with friends. And there's going to be moments where this small little test of how someone handles power demonstrates a lot about them, and you can see how people start to grow apart. You're going to grow apart from a lot of your friends. If you don't, there's a few friends that you have that might last a long time, but if you really go through a lot of improvements in your life and you don't notice you're growing apart from friends, either you were incredibly lucky and you found like a really solid group of people, which I am so happy for you if you're able to find those people. Like really, really congratulations to you. Like that's awesome that you can have people who, even if they're not growing and becoming amazing people in their own rights. And I don't just mean like they become popular, get a lot of money, like, just improving themselves. Even if they don't allow jealousy or anything like that. They still just treat you how they always did when they were younger. If you have people like that, then wow, you're so lucky or fortunate because you've earned that, so I'm very happy for you. But for most people, you're going to grow apart from people. And I know this because I've been through it and I've seen other people go through it, and it's the most common phenomenon that happens when you start changing your life, is the people in your life start resisting it. So I was seeing that happening. We were going in different trajectories, and there were certain forces that were pushing him in this direction of ideologies and beliefs and where he believes life should go, and then I was going in this direction. And I saw the currents changing for a while, but I was okay with them as long as they didn't change how you treated me. I don't care if we have completely different political beliefs, religious beliefs, economic, professional beliefs on women, like whatever. I don't care. As long as it doesn't change how you treat me, your respect towards me. But I saw it started to change his respect for me. And I called him out a few times. Like I remember we were in the car and he was on the way to, move to his place after I got back from Europe. And I remember he was kind of lecturing me on this and this and this. And I was like, hey man, and I was like, it kind of feels like you're telling me I need to live the way you want to live. And I laid it out very nicely. And he's like, you know what? You're right. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I shouldn't do that, But the behavior resurfaced because there was a root issue that was causing this to grow. And it wasn't just him. He had, like I said, there was some external pressures that I believe were pushing him in that direction. So it kind of came to its apex when I was in Europe and we had some separation and I could just feel this weird tension. And then he had some graphic design skills, and so he was helping me on the cover for my first book, King of College. And I remember he made this cover, and it was really pretty, but it was more like an artistic cover. And I showed it to Chase, and Chase is like, yeah, this is cool as like an artistic thing, but it's not good for marketing. It's not going to flash out. It's not going to be something someone sees and want to buy. So I told him as much. And his response was basically along the lines of, oh, you're just going to cheap out to like have good marketing, like, pff. And it was really arrogant and dismissive. Now, I know where this came from because he had a degree in, graphic design. So I could see that there was some sort of professional, resistance to it. But it still came out as very insulting. And I was just like, okay, you know, and it was the last straw. If that was just the first thing that came out of random, I'd be like, I don't care, you know, whatever, dude, you know, go have a beer, we can talk about it, whatever. But it was just a long line of shit, and then that was the final thing. And I was like, all right, I think this guy is just not jiving with my life anymore. And so I was a bit immature, and I blocked him. That was very, very immature. Like, but we had an agreement, actually. Okay, so we actually had a safety built in that if we had this, because we had a third best friend who turned out to be a psychopath, like legit, and cut us both off but for no reason, like just because he was done with us. There was really no sort of conflict aside from him literally having an empathy disorder, which he confessed to me that he had, like psychiatrically evaluated like empathy disorder, and his brother did too. His brother was a criminal. And so we had that falling out with that friend, and we promised each other if one of us like gets pissed at the other so much that if we block each other, then the other person has to remind them of the promise we made and to offer to have like a talk, right? So if he auto-rejected out of the friendship, I would be like, hey man, remember we talked about this? And then he would be like, okay, cool. Well, I ended up doing it, and it was very mature of me. I could have handled it a lot better, so I'll take fault for that. But he kept his end of the bargain, and he reached out and he said, hey man, I kind of stepped over my bounds, and we promised each other we'd have this talk. And I said, you know what, you're right. I responded, I said, you're correct, we need to have this talk. But I said, you're not going to like this talk, because we're going to have to talk about some things very personal to you, right? That had to do with why I think he was kind of changing his behavior. And so I said, yes, we'll talk, but it's going to be a difficult talk, and you know exactly what we're going to talk about, because he was aware of my opinions on some of the things going on. And he never responded. I said, okay, that was it. That was the answer that I needed, because I was pretty sure we were done as friends. And that was like a, hey man, we're going to have to make a drastic change to how you treat me. You don't have to change your life. That's not what I was asking him to do. But I was asking him to not allow those things in his life to affect how he's treating me. But they did. And, that happens. And like I said, I actually tried to reach out to him a couple months ago. Okay, so my video got canceled while I was filming it, and it went on for like a couple more minutes. But, so yeah, I just grabbed my phone and I'm going to do a quick selfie to finish off the video. Sorry, it doesn't look as pretty with the front camera. Anyways, so I hope that story was educational, and it illustrated the dynamics that happens when, you give a friend some sort of vulnerability and they have a chance to demonstrate that they don't handle power so well, right? And that, we can appreciate that people want to help us. And maybe it even comes from a good place, right? But there are social hierarchies in the world, right? There is a reason why almost everywhere has a hierarchy. Police, military, they have rankings. You have rankings in the government. You have rankings at work, right? You have the people here. You have the supervisors and the managers in between. Then you have the CEO, the CFO. And different people have different hierarchies related to different specialities. But even within those specialities, there's a guy usually who's at the top, right? The CEO, the owner of the company. So we need to understand that hierarchies exist everywhere else in the world. Why should they not exist within friendships? And I'm not saying that you need to, establish rankings between your friends or anything silly like that. What I'm suggesting is that you test your friends and test yourself, because you have within yourself the capability to, act arrogant and better than other people, and sometimes over like the stupidest of things. And these actions are almost always unwholesome. The only time when authority is very useful in social aspects is if you are contributing something to that person, right? Or, right, if you're seducing a girl, if a girl does not see you as an authority figure, she is very likely not going to sleep with you. There's some exceptions to that. Like, there's girls who will, like, hook up with a guy who's, like, sweet and innocent, right? But for the most part, girls do prefer when a guy is an authority figure. So, in that instance, it's wholesome because she's deciding that you're, a leader in her life. It's obviously has some more nuance than that. But your friendship the hierarchy should be clearly understood. You may have an advantage here, they may have an advantage here, but you see each other as brothers, and you're brothers in arms trying to help each other through life. But if there is not a clearly established hierarchy of equality, right, you can come to the conclusion that there's equality. But sometimes your friends don't necessarily see it that way. And a lot of friendships have equality only because of circumstances, right? Man, I'm sure that if you took the average friendship and you put a girl, money, or status on the line, you would start to see the true nature of a lot of friendships very, very quickly. That's not to make you jaded or to think less of people. It's just from, man, I've seen a lot. People are real good friends, but then when there's pussy on the line, when there's money involved, or when there's status and the chance for like popularity and status, people act different. So it should be important that you test the people around you and test yourself, right? I don't want you to have this attitude where you're like, yeah, I'm going to test people around me, and if they don't have perfect virtue, I mean, if you want people with perfect virtue, you need to go to a monastery and hang around only beings who have attained certain levels of enlightenment, right? Because other than that, everyone you're going to encounter is susceptible to temptation. It's just a question of to what degree are you willing to accept people's faults in their behaviors towards others based on how they're treated and how they're respected, because power is very tempting, and I would be very careful with those around you, and a good way to test them is to give them a little bit of power over you, because power corrupts, and if someone doesn't allow power to corrupt them, they have some virtue and they're worth keeping around. They don't have to be perfect, but it depends how stringent your standards are. Eventually over the years, my standards got higher and higher and higher, and my friend groups got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm at more peace. And, if I don't continue to find people who are on the same mission as me, then it's okay, right? I'll interact with people when necessary, and of course I want to help others. But when it comes to like the people who you consider very close to you and helping you on your journey, and you helping them equally on their journey, you should probably have some higher standards than you probably are currently having. So I hope this video was educational to you. Sorry about the shift of quality. And if you're interested in my products, in my courses, and learning from me more, I have a texting book in the description. You can check it out. I also have a day game course that teaches you how to approach girls the good old-fashioned way. And very, very relevant to this video is my college book called King of College. And it is, it involves the guy in the story. His name in the book is DeLorean. And so you can see our story in its full funness, because most of it was pretty positive and wholesome. But it teaches you so much about relationships and hierarchies and social clout, status, competition, and man, because it's a college book, but people don't evolve beyond college, okay? People don't get much more mature beyond high school. It's very rare. Like 95% of humanity is perpetually stuck in high school. So I hope that book could be educational to you, especially if you're in college, but otherwise it's still very educational. So yeah, I hope you check it out. And if you want to have coaching with me one-on-one, you can check out the description for a consultation call and we can chat some. And yeah, so HectorCastillo, girlschase.com. Hope you liked the video. See you soon. Ciao.